everyone here joining us. We're super excited about tonight's talk. Mia, do you want to sort of kick us off tonight?
Yeah, I just want to welcome all of our PCA instructors and DE leaders. We had a call last night with the DE leadership, so back to back is a lot of dedication, which shows me that you guys are all excited to continue your education and, complete mindset change and learning from some great people. So I'd like to thank Ken Hill and Dion for giving their time tonight. And I know you're going to love the presentation. I saw it, and there's some great things for us to take back to the track and take back to our students.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mia. I know how much effort you put into education, and it really pays off. It's really impressive. I've been in this sport for 20 years now. Ken, you've been in this sport how long about now? More than me.
Yeah, I mean it's more than 2 decades. Let's put it that way.
and I've never seen any organization take education as seriously as you take it. And that's what our sport needs. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and the entire leadership at Push Club America. You guys are doing a fantastic job. And of course, all the instructors and everyone joining us and, spending an evening talking race car stuff with us. We're going to make it as much fun as possible. So excited to kick things off. If anyone doesn't know, my name is Dion Von Moltke. I've spent a long time as a WeatherTech driver. I'm a co-founder here at Blaze, do a lot of coaching myself. And I'll be kind of leading the conversation tonight. Ken, do you want to just really introduce yourself really quick as well?
Yeah, Ken Hill. I've been in motorsports for near 3 decades, coaching professionally for about 2 decades. This is how I make my living, and this is what I do. And this is everything I do is to be a better motorsports coach. I raced at a pretty high level on the motorcycle world, AMA Superbike top 10. Lucky enough to get a lot of my mentoring from multiple world champions, and was involved with some schools with some world champions for quite a long time. And pretty much this is all I do as far as either coaching one-on-one or trying to improve everything that we do off the track. And Division One, of course, Dion knows, is near and dear to me because I have spent a lot of my probably last 7 to 10 years working on vision. So I'm super stoked for this one.
Great.
Absolutely. And just to sort of, if anyone doesn't know, Ken, we brought him onto our coaching team, and I myself have learned so much from Ken, especially in this subject area. I don't think there's anyone that's a better expert or more knowledgeable especially when it comes to vision. I mean, Ken, you pretty much know everything about this sport anyway, but like vision is one area I think you're really, really good at. So I'm super glad you're able to make it tonight and for this conversation. The one thing I wanted just to tackle right up front is we're going to hit you with a lot of information tonight. This is not the normal way that I would coach someone, right? It's going to be overwhelming amount of information. So what my goal tonight is to highlight as much and give you as much knowledge as possible, try to give you actionable ways on how we approach coaching it. But the thing here is coaching has to be personalized and has to be consistent. As a driver grows, you're going to be adding things to their toolbox. But I think it's a great it's a great idea to give someone all of the information up front, even if you know it's going to be too much for them to actually consume, digest. But as they go in their journey, light bulbs and things will just sort of start to go off in their mind. They'll think back to that talk you gave or that conversation you had, and it'll start to click. So the goal of tonight is to not give you exactly the right, information to give at the right time. We're going to give you a lot of information, and we're going to try to give you a process of when to say things and when not to say things, and a process to grow with the driver. But I want everyone to know it's going to be a little bit longer talk, and it's going to be quite a lot. We are going to have time for a Q&A at the end. So I want this to be interactive. I'm going to have the chat up. I'm going to try to be doing both. So if you've got questions along the way, drop them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. But at the end, we'll use our Q&A and make sure we have a dedicated section. So with that, I'd say let's get into how to coach vision. First off, I should say, I kind of had this up earlier. Just want to say thank you to all of you. Taking the time out of your evening to come in, learn with us. You could be doing a million other things. We'll really appreciate it. We're going to make sure it's worth your time tonight. So there are 4 components that really drive back to good vision. It is the driver's body, and I'm going to break that down a little bit more. Where they look, when they look at that point, and the final point is our ability for visual scanning, which is something that's not talked about very often. And it's something that I think I've learned a ton from Ken. It's an area that separates athletes in all sports. So let's start digging into these 4 components here. So as an overview, we're going to cover today the correct reference points, the where to look, the order of those reference points, how important they are, and that's going to start to build up what you teach beginner level drivers, intermediate level drivers, and more advanced level drivers, and then when to look at each reference point. The idea behind eyes up, we're going to try to give you a definition and almost an algorithm, to use for lack of better words, on what that actually means. So step 1, the body. If we are driving tense, or if we're driving with anxiety, what happens to our eyes? Our eyes naturally come in, right? It is our parasympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight. It's meant to come in. It's meant to zone in on one area, and that's to help escape from a lion chasing you or something like that, which is the opposite state of what we need on the racetrack. So my first step is to observe a driver, maybe before the session, during the session, and look for tension in the body. Look for the death grip on the wheel. Look for abrupt inputs, and we're going to cover some of these a little bit more. But if they are tense, if they are anxious, if they are nervous, which is totally normal day 1, we immediately know and can expect for those eyes to fall. Ken, when you're looking for this sort of tension, whether it's through video analysis, whether it's, right seat coaching, or whatever you might be, what are the things that you're looking for?
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot to unpack there, and I can't tell you how important our vision skills are, because our vision is so I use the word vision, right? And of course our eyes are the tool that creates the vision, but our vision is what feeds our information, our brain, the information of what to do. And a lot of times when we're looking at vision, is we have people that don't necessarily know where to look, or when they should look, or how long to look at certain things. And so that part of vision skills is obviously very important. But the other one is vision also works hand in hand with focus. Because if your vision's not engaged, that means your focus is not engaged, which means your technique is not engaged. So all of that follows itself down. So if we don't have good vision skills, then we're not going to have good focus, and we're not going to have good technique. So to Dion's point, when I get right seat with somebody, or even when we watch video, you can even see it on data to a degree, is when we start seeing abrupt or late inputs. So like, even if you get down to the first corner, right, and all of a sudden there's too much wheel, or the brake application is too much. A lot of times we can almost tell right out of the gate that they don't have a place to put their eyes, which means they don't have a place to put their technique. So it's out of the gate when we see this, somebody tense or somebody late or somebody abrupt, it's a lot of the times that things are coming at them too quickly. So getting their eyes to move, to move to the right place at the right time. So yeah, the first thing, Dion, to your point is, if I start seeing very late or abrupt inputs, then I know we typically don't have our eyes in the right spot. And we can go on and on with talking about overslowing and all those types of things, that how much eyes are connected to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, I'm looking at, before we even go out, the importance of body position, right? If your body's not in the right place, and a lot of us overlook this and don't understand how that relates back to vision, but if your body's not in the right place, you can't engage the right muscles at the right time, which then leads to more stress on the wrong muscle groups, which then leads to sort of death gripping the steering wheel, trying to overcompensate, which then leads to more stress, which then leads to eyes coming down. So it's like, if you're just a little bit off in your fundamentals of simply sitting in the right state, everything else will break down as well. So the first thing I look for is the driver even just sitting right?
Yeah,
that allows them to engage the core. Sorry, go for it, Ken.
No, that's great, Dion, because you're right? If they're tense, and I can tell you this goes along with physical fitness and mental fitness and all those things. But if we're tense, that's just not sustainable, right? Like if a death grip's not sustainable. And the first thing that happens when that system wears out, where you can only grab the wheel so much, or your neck's only going to do so much, or holding yourself in your seat, if it's not correct, your vision's the first thing that goes. And if that's the vision's the first thing that goes, then of course, just as I mentioned, right, your focus goes and your technique goes. So being in the right position to sit comfortably and being able to be relaxed so you can use your arms and your fingers and your feet correctly, it's a massive compliment for vision skills.
Exactly. And so the ways that we look for tension in the driver is the seating position, right? Can they put their wrists on top of the wheel? Are their elbows nice and bent forward at all? Can they reach the pedals properly? I try to ask, you can't see if they're consciously engaging the core at turn-in, meaning they're not flexing their ab muscles, but you want to have core engagement when you turn into the corner. You want your core to be doing that. I ask my drivers to think about that a little bit. And now, obviously, here, I'm going to state this, that I'm not telling a green level driver or a very first day on the racetrack driver to check in on that. That's going to be a little bit more of as they get comfortable, but I want them thinking about that because that helps relax them. You can see typically death grip on video. It's really easy to see. And then, like Ken said, this idea of how abrupt their first 5% of inputs are, meaning turn-in rates, brake rates, throttle rates. When they're really abrupt, that's a great sign that they are, eyes are low, fight or flighters in, things are going wrong. When you're smooth, that's when we're fast, right? So those are the things that I look for to check for tension in the driver. So sort of step one, before you get into anything else, is checking it on the body and continually checking it on the body. The second part, and this is going to be sort of where a lot of the meat of the conversation is we're going to talk about the where to look point. Now, this is going to be it's something, a piece of feedback that I hear a lot of drivers say is, Dion, this is great, but holy cow, how can I think about all of this while I'm driving? So this is going to be, you're going to feed through the fire hose, and it's something that'll slowly build in your own driving. And it's something that's really important for new drivers to know what it looks like, what the pros, what greats are doing so that they can root back. And so what we're going to talk about is the 5 reference points that every driver uses in every corner. And then I'm going to talk about how I build a driver up to those 5 reference points. So every corner, and this, by the way, this is Ken Hill's baby. He's the one that introduced me to this, and it was spot on with it. And what you'll see here is we actually work them backwards. So number 1 is our exit apex. What the heck is an exit apex? Essentially, the exit apex is exactly the point where we get to our widest point in the corner. The reason we call it that is when you talk to most drivers and say, hey, Ken, where do you exit at turn 3 at VIR? What's your exit point?
Yeah, and so for me, I know when I look at a turn like turn 3 at VIR, I'm going to tell you it's where the pavement, like where the pavement, you've got the extra pavement on the end, where the pavement starts to come together. So, or when the pavement starts to get smaller, it's right at that point. So that's where my vision's going to go. And that's where I'm going to try to drive to. And so, awesome. I mean, there's so many, as Dion will tell you, this is everything we're trying to do is get the car in a position to accelerate. So identifying where you're going to accelerate to, it needs to be much more fine than just saying, I am going to track out. Instead, we need a deliberate point, not only to put the car, but a place to put our eyes.
And that's, when I talk to a lot of the drivers that I coach and I'll ask them, like, what's your exit? Where are you focused on exit? I'll hear, hey, I'm using the exit curve. And at the same time, when we say, where do you apex? I hear, I'm trying to apex, the second green stripe on the apex curve. I'm like, that's great. How you think about apex is how you think about exit. So that's why we use the term exit apex, is it's a very specific point. The second reference point is the apex. The third reference point is the slow point of the corner. We'll talk a little bit about that one. Our fourth is the turn-in point, and our fifth is the initial brake zone. So in every corner, these are the 5 reference points that we're using. So we're going to break this down a little bit more. So when I'm working with a more entry-level driver, first-year driver, I want them to know what all 5 reference points are. I do not expect them to be able to nail and look at all 5 reference points at all times, right? And the reason why you build up to those 5 reference points is it goes back to what Ken was saying early on, where in every moment by having 5 reference points, you're always constantly going to be looking for the next point, shifting along the path, which then gives your mind the focus it needs to stay in the moment. And when you hear drivers talking about, it was the last lap of the Daytona 24-hour, like, how did you pull off that win? And you hear a driver say, well, I just hit my marks. This is what they're really talking about, is they stayed in the zone, in the moment, by just going from one reference point to the next. At the early stage, when it's more about survival than anything else, I really want my drivers to focus on 3 things. And this is just for day one, let's get things right, which is nothing too new. It's, hey, we want a decent apex. We want a decent turn-in, and we want a decent initial brake zone. I'm going to pick a pretty early initial brake zone. So when I build up to these 5 reference points, I'm going to focus on these 3 things to start. Once the driver can consistently hit these 3 points with car position, with eyes, that's when I'm going to introduce the 4th point, which is our exit apex. For more as you transition from real beginners to more intermediate, I think the exit apex it's hard to say one reference point's more important than any other reference point, but our exit reference point is, if I had to pick one, is probably the most important, because where we place the car at corner exit changes where we apex, and where we apex changes where we turn in, and where we turn in changes where we brake. So that's why we always work this backwards when we're talking about reference points, when we're finding our reference points. We want to go every corner backwards. If there's a section of corners, like Summit Point, you have 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to work that whole section backwards. I'm going to get my reference points in 9, and then my 8, and then my 7, and then my 6. Because how I want to exit out of 9 will change 8, will change 7, will change 6, and then it'll change the reference points in every one of these. So as the driver gets a little bit better, I'm going to introduce the exit apex, and I anticipate that potentially changing their apex points, their turn-in point, their initial brake point. Some of those are going to shift a little bit as we hone in on their exit apex point. And then the phase 3 of this is once they're really honed in and understand the exit reference point, that's where I focus on the minimum speed point. And Mark just asked us, and Ken, I'm going to let you answer this one, and this could be a whole other conversation, but just in a really quick way. Why would the slow point not be the apex point? Why are those not the same thing?
Yeah, because so we've heard it all the time. They're like, dude, it was so great. I worked with Dion this last week. It was awesome. Dion showed me to brake to every apex. And someone goes, well, wait a minute. I worked with Dion last week and he said to throttle at every apex. Which one is it? And the answer is both, depending on what type of corner it is. So the apex is not the slow point. The apex is the apex. The slowest point of the corner has to do with what that corner offers as far as whether the exit's longer or whether the entry's longer. So exit corner, the slow point is before the apex. Entry corner, it's at the apex or after the apex. So that's a quick answer to that.
Awesome. And we can send out some more material on other subjects tonight, because that's a really large conversation, and we'll keep it focused. But I did want to tackle that really quick for Mark.
Yeah, and then if I can linger here for a second. well, how did all these come into play? And how they all these come into these came into play was many years ago. Um, I'm lucky that I've got a great peer group, and to be able to bounce things off my peer group and also be involved in the things that they do, which is outside of motorcycles, but things that also have high consequences, and take training to accomplish. And I've been lucky enough to work with some military operators and the things that they do in the SF world, as well as in the fighter pilot world. And when we love to observe each other's worlds and figure our stuff out, right? And so me being able to go observe what they do, and they the weird thing is they all want to drive cars and they all want to ride motorcycles. All of these guys, so they do. We're thinking they do cool stuff and they want to do our stuff. So when we get to observe these people and how they train, we really realize that they had a very, very deliberate set of reference points that they were looking at. And I mean, for instance, when I got to watch, get to watch some of these SF guys and they clear a room or do something, it's silly, right? What's their first reference point? Door hinges. So they need to know which way the door opens. And then from there, once they go into a room, they can see things. Same thing even with a Top Gun pilot, right? So being able to deal with some of these pilots, and of course, we'll talk about OODA loop and what the OODA loop means and how important how they observe, how they orient, how they decide, and how they act is all based on specific references. So we've heard a lot of people say, oh, you should only be using your peripheral vision. And your peripheral vision absolutely has a job. But if we want to get a deliberate, result from a reference point, you have to look at it long enough to intake it, to know if you're lined up with it or what you're trying to do with it, so then you can act on it. And going back to what Dion said earlier, which makes so much sense, is when you have this loop, right, this loop of references, it helps you play this in your head. So then you build segments, and then the segments are literally the tape that you're playing in your head as you go around track. So yeah, the reference points, how they're chosen, the order they are, is a massive deal. And it really will shortcut you working with somebody, because if you say, look, our goal, first of all, our whole goal is to get the car in the apex. And you can describe what the apex is. And you say, we're going to adjust how we get to the car by our turn-in reference, because where you turn in dictates where you're going to apex and where you're going to exit. So even if you have them focus on the apex, the turn-in reference point, and then even where they apply the brakes, they're going to be miles ahead of not giving them anything specific to look at.
Yeah, exactly. So as we kind of progress here, the final phase that I'm going to coach somebody, and I'm going to explain this, why it's the final thing, a little bit later, because it's going to use a slightly more advanced skill. But the final reference point that I really want someone to hone in on, and this is using this visually, is where the minimum speed comes in the corner. So I want my driver to know that all 5 points exist. I don't expect entry-level drivers to execute and know about all 5, so I'm going to simplify things. Let's get 3. Once we're 3, I add the 4th, which is our exit apex, which is one of the most important. I get that really kind of honed and consistent, and then I layer in the minimum speed. So knowledge-wise, I don't hide anything from them up front. They know where we're headed. They know that there's going to be 5, but let's start simplified. Let's start with the 3, nail the 3, and then systematically add as you're ready, which is kind of my big belief as a coach. Is I want my driver, I want the person I'm coaching, I want them to know all of the right way to do things up front, even if it's too advanced, too much knowledge for them, to a point. I'm not going to go, super into detail, but I want them to know about these things. So from there, we're going to move away from the where to look, which is the 5 reference points, and we're going to talk about eye timing, which is just as important and often the thing that's never really spoken about. So this is when you hear someone say eyes up, this is what the heck does that actually mean part of that whole conversation, right? And the first thing I want to tackle, and the first thing I love talking about, is, can you have your eyes too far forward? Most drivers would say No, like you're looking as far ahead as possible. I say that's wrong. You can have your eyes too far forward. And as a really crude level example, because I think it's the best way to visualize this, is if I have my water bottle here, for example, and I want to reach and grab my water bottle. As I start to reach, if I sort of pick my eyes up away from that water bottle, I just missed it. Now, I don't need to look at the water bottle until my hand's on it to grab it, right? No. Once I start reaching and I see my hand is on the right trajectory to that bottle, okay, then I can pick my eyes up and go to the next point. And that's exactly what Ken was starting to talk a little about the orientation part of the OODA loop, where you have to look at a reference point long enough to get the right orientation. Am I right, Ken?
Yeah, it's funny. We could use two great examples here. One is if we have a driver that, for instance, they fade or crab into the corner, right? So they start to crab in, which means they simply, as they approach the turning point, they walk into the corner. They fade in or they crab in. So how do we get a driver to not do that? And it's very simple. Look at your turn-in reference point longer. In other words, look at it long enough to know that you're going to turn in at that appropriate point, then you can turn in.
Can I just jump in there really quick? Right? So when we see that, and let's say I'm braking and I'm starting to head towards to the middle of the corner, where is that driver typically looking at that point? If their eyes are too far forward, where are they looking at that point typically?
Typically they're looking for their apex, right?
Awesome. That whole adage of like where your eyes goes, where the car goes, right? Like that's exactly what's happening there. And then, as soon as you're like, wait, no, just look at your car. Because if you're doing that, but if you look at your turning point, you'll realize, oh, wait, like, why am I not to the outside of the racetrack? And you'll immediately fix it. So just wanted to build on that really quick, Ken.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, you're going to go where your eyes are pointed. So if you point your eyes at the right time, on the right reference for the right amount of time, you're going to maximize everything that then becomes in that reference or segment. And this is why timing is so important. And again, getting back to the periphery periphery is very, very important. But here we need to be able to look at our references as long as we need to get what we need from them. You have permission to do that. And it's, for instance, having somebody that's missing their apexes, great. Look at them longer. You'll find, I mean, literally look at the apex longer and you'll be surprised at how it allows them to get the correct direction at the right time. So very, very, very.
And this is a process, right? Like our eyes can be too far forward, they can be too far back. And just like how we're going to teach our drivers and experiment with how late you can brake or how early you can come off the brakes, they're going to be trying to constantly adjust their vision to be, and it's going to go from too far forward to too low, and it's going to hone in. And by the way, this is going to happen at every level, right? Myself, when I drive a car and I go out of pit lane and I'm like, whoa, this feels fast. First thing I think about my eyes. And it's less about the reference point. It's more about my timing of when I'm looking for the next reference point. I'm usually late looking for the next reference point when the car feels really fast. So this is something we're all working on improving.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on with that, Dion, which is like typically when your sense of speed is off a little bit, it's because your eyes are slow or low or they're not looking at your references. So sense of speed really comes to what you're looking at and for how long.
Yeah, exactly. So now what I want to do is I've got a series of images where I'm going to try to show you exactly what this looks like. Now, obviously, this all happens in 2 seconds. And I would say like this is not something that it's not necessarily like a conscious thought. You get to the point where all of this happens subconsciously. Now, maybe one reference point you have to kind of consciously think about, but I've got because when I started, I had a book and I wrote down my reference points in every corner and I labeled them all out and I know where my reference points are. So it's a great way to start. Nowadays, I just drive and I'm able to pick them up really quick on the fly, but you get to that point. So what I'm going to try to show you is where I'm looking with my focus vision and my peripheral vision at each point in the corner. So as I approach the brake zone, the red circle on the screen is my focal vision. That's where my eyes are really focused on. So that is at the 3 cone. This is turn 3 at Sebring International Raceway. That 3 cone, the end of the access road, that's my turn-in marker. As I approach my brake point, just force the habit, I'm always glancing into my side mirrors. I always want to know as I approach the brakes, what's around me? Am I getting ready for a dive bomb? So my peripheral vision, is the flag stand, is the side mirror, is my kind of center mirror, but my focal vision is on the brake point. This would be far too early to look for the turn-in point because while I'm close to having the right orientation, I'm not quite there yet. I'm not perfectly straight. I'm keeping my eyes focused on that brake point for a little bit longer. As we approach the initial brake zone, so now you can see that end of the access road is right in front of us. I'm not quite there yet, so I'm not braking. Notice how my vision has shifted. Now, I don't need to be looking at that, reference point until I'm on top of it. I've now shifted my eyes, my focus vision, I should say, to the turn-in point, and it's my peripheral vision that then picks up the very next reference point, which is that brake point. So it's almost like I kind of pass things from my focal vision to my peripheral vision as my focus goes to the next point. And this is, again, it's a transition. It kind of fades from black to gray. It slowly moves in this direction. So now I'm looking for that turn-in point, and I'm picking up my brake point, my peripheral vision. As we go a little bit farther into the corner, notice, so my brake point was the 3 cone. Notice here, I'm at the 2 cone, so I'm not turning it in yet. This is something that I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about a little bit later. But we talked about how for advanced level drivers, I introduce the min speed location as a visual reference. I'm not turning in yet. I call this stage the glance. At this point in the corner, and this happens extremely quickly, I want to glance with my focus vision to where I want the slow point in the corner to come, and then right away I'm back to my turn-in marker. So it's a really quick glance and back. Not to get too far into the why behind it in this call, but essentially where most drivers go a little bit wrong with low eyes is if you're just staring down your turn-in point, what your brain is saying is, oh gosh, I got to slow the car down. I got to slow the car down by here, right, by that green square. But in reality, no, I've got to slow the car down. I've got all that extra track to continue to slow the car down. So it sort of extends the corner, slows things down a little bit. My minimum speed isn't the turn-in point. It's where I want my minimum speed, so it slows things down for me. So glance, back to the turn-in point. When I'm arriving at the turn-in point, what am I doing? I'm transitioning my focus vision from that turn-in point to the apex point, and I'm picking up my peripheral, in my peripheral vision, I'm picking up the turn-in point. So here you can see that red dot isn't immediately at the apex. It's transitioning to the apex, and that turn-in point is picked up in my peripheral vision. So you can kind of see how my focus vision is kept at that point to that turn-in point until I've got the right orientation, until I know I'm going to hit it. Then I transition up. As I'm starting to approach the apex, this is where I find the best reference point to understand this sort of how long to look at a reference point. I am still looking at my apex here. A lot of drivers might think that seems like low eyes, but my big question is, I know my apex is the very end of that apex curve. Ken, would you say this car is got the perfect orientation to hit the end of that apex curve yet?
I mean, you're on the right trajectory, right? So all this is yes, if you leave your eyes where they're at now, the car's going to follow that, and it's going to be right on where it needs to be.
Yeah, but if let's say right now I pick my eyes up and look to the exit reference point,
you'll lose your apex. I mean, you'll lose your apex.
Oh, exactly.
And that goes back to what I was saying, right? You have a person that's missing your apex, is leave your eyes on your apex longer, because you need to you have to finish that reference point. And you finish
That's a great way to finish it.
You finish your reference point by leaving your eyes on it until you leave your eyes on your reference point until you have orientation to it. It means you're lined up with it, meaning you don't have to make any steering inputs. You're there, you're done. And so, and then going back to what Dion was talking about transitioning and how he moved his eyes, what we're trying to do there is engage your depth perception. And what that does is, so it's like no different than you pulling up to a stop sign or in traffic, right? You see the car stopped in front of you. You go, oh crap, I need to stop there. You apply your brakes, and whether you know it or not, you look back to your car and then look back. You're judging how much brake pressure to use to get to the result, to get to the spot that you want. And that's exactly what Dion's doing. If he stared only in front of him, he would overslow. If he just looked into the apex, he'd fade in and he wouldn't have any precision, and he'd actually miss his apex. So, or he'd have the incorrect slow point. So that's why that quick scan, it's engaging your depth perception so your motor controls can literally adjust to what you want to do. Yeah. And
which also is the fundamental to build fuel references on top of it. But that's a whole other conversation, right? Yeah.
Oh my God, it's a lot.
Exactly. So building on this is I continue to come down to that apex point. This is the zone now that I've kind of said, okay, I know I'm going to hit my apex now, right? I'm not at the apex, but now I can clearly see I've got the right car angle. I know I'm going to hit it. This is the point where I transition my eyes from the apex point to my exit apex point, which is about a car length and a half before the end of that curve on the very outside, right? So it's not it's not a whole exit curve. No, it's that specific point. And again, I'm not just looking completely away from the apex. No, it's the handoff. My focus says, okay, peripheral, you've got the apex. I'm going to pick up that exit reference point, right? And now I've transitioned my eyes up. And now I'm coming out to the exit. I'm not at the exit point yet. But what do you know? There's another corner. You're always looking for the next reference point. So now my focus vision goes, boom, because turn 3, 4, it's deeper in here. Your exit reference point is almost the turn-in point. The 2 points almost kind of combine a little bit. But you can see I'm still using my peripheral to check where I'm making sure I'm getting out to my point. My focus goes to the turn 4 apex now. And I just noticed here, Michael said, and I noticed that you have actually turned your head, not just moved your eyes. I didn't even notice that, but it's a great observation. If I go back a little bit, if you kind of look at these photos, you can kind of see this a little bit. Right there, you can kind of, well, it's maybe a little hard. But if you look really closely, especially here, like that one, you can see, boom, head goes in. And notice the head goes in before I'm turning into the corner. That's often something that I kind of see in a driver's video. If I'm watching a video and I see the hands and the head move at the same time, low eyes. Know it every single time. The head and then the hands follow. It's pretty close, but you can kind of see that. It's a great call out, Michael. Making sense so far, Ken?
Yeah, this is great. And just to go back and reiterate one, you said a great point, which is now you're going to concentrate on your next segment, right? Your next reference. And that's how we keep focus. You're literally transferring, as you said, you're transferring from reference to reference to reference and reference, and those just become a loop. And if you want 100% result from that reference or that segment, you have to be 100% focused on it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
So there was a question, Dion.
Yeah.
Did I understand that the slow point is before apex in slow corners and at/after the apex in fast corners? And I think that's where you were talking about exit corners and entry corners. So I don't know if you would like to take a second.
Yeah. The one thing I want to clarify is slow corners or fast corners doesn't matter for this. It is exit speed corners or entry speed corners. For example, for anyone that knows Road America, you think about the kink. It's as fast and as ballsy as it gets. So we would all think, oh, well, that's got to be an entry speed corner. The kink's actually an exit speed corner, right? It leads onto a really long straightaway down to Canada corner. So the minimum speed is before or at apex in an exit speed corner, and it's at or after the apex in an entry speed corner. Speed doesn't really have a relation to where the minimum speed is. Did I get that right, Ken?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, that's it. Speed's irrelevant. It has to do with what comes before it and what comes after it. And again, it's a great way to know what control you're supposed to be using at what time.
Does that make sense, Mia?
Yeah, that does. Absolutely.
Awesome.
The second thing is I've had a couple questions of people asking if we're going to be able to publish the PowerPoint, and I just wanted to let them know that we're going to publish the video in 2 to 3 days, and so that they'll be made aware when that is available.
Absolutely. And absolutely.
I see Jared's question in there about eye tracking glasses. Jared, to answer that and everybody else, yes, I've been involved with eye tracking glasses now for about 6 or 7 months. And that is going to be a really big part of what I'm going to be working on and sort of some of my next steps. Yes, I am big on eye tracking glasses. They're
cool.
Yeah, they're cool. They're also between 35 and 50 grand. Plus you got to know how to use them. And anyway, they're wonderful. So yes, they're part of our gig.
And Jared's second part of that was directed to me. Is PCA looking into bringing those into our development training? And not yet. One would hope that pricing would come down at some point.
Mia, I got you on that. Let me do my thing, and you'll have a pretty cool program probably in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. So sort of talking a little bit more about this, the final part of good vision is our ability to scan from reference point to reference point quickly and focus on that reference point. This is when you think about elite level athletes, across any sport, this is one of the most important skills. And when you look at sort of the data points of what makes someone elite, the most consistent factor is their elite level vision, knowing where to look, when to look, and their ability to quickly scan and sort of process that information. I cannot overstate how important this is, but excitingly, it's also something that can 100% be trained, because this is less about 20/20 vision or how good your eyes are. It's a little bit more about our brain and its ability to process the information that our eyes are presenting with it. So on that, let me move forward a little bit here. I wanted to give you guys a quick example of how we can actually train our vision. And this is actually something we'll be adding into the Blaze platform here. But one really quick drill, and I'm going to let Ken talk a little bit more about this all, because this is an area that he's really an expert in. So one quick drill is, if you get, and this is all easy stuff, get an index card and get a piece of paper. And what we want to do is, on the card, have 5 rows and 5 columns of letters. And you want those letters to match up perfectly. So like it would be A, F, G, and the paper would say A, F, G. So both are the exact same. And what you want to do is go put that piece of paper on the wall, take, steps back 8, 10, 12 feet. It doesn't need to be perfect. And you want to sit in a chair or stand up, and you want to have the index card in front of you, and you want to have that piece of paper directly in front of you. And all you want to do is focus your eyes on the first letter of the first column and row on the index card. And you want to focus on that and until your eyes capture and get that focus. It's not blurry anymore. No, you see it. And then you transition your eyes up to the next letter on the piece of paper on the wall until it finds that focus. And you just transition your eyes back and forth. And how quickly they can refocus from one reference point to the next is something that you can train. This is just one really simple way to build up that drill. But Ken, I'm going to turn this over a little bit more to you. You can talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so I think that, vision is 100% trainable. Back up a little bit is, I've always had this belief, and for many, many years, that athletes or motorsport athletes that had natural talent, I always thought they could just see things better, right? They just naturally were able to intake it. They were more comfortable at speed. And when we started working with a vision performance guy, Alex Andrich, who also is in the PCA, Alex, we were able to develop a protocol for basically motorsports. And when we would run motorsports athletes through his program, we found that the ones that were the fastest, even when they weren't trained, their vision wasn't trained yet because we start off with an evaluation and go from there. But the ones that were the fastest typically had the best vision. So we kind of proved that point that, yeah, the ones that...
And by best vision, you don't mean 2020, 2010, right?
No, it's about a 10-step process that we go through. Obviously, we do a vision check. I mean, we're looking at left and right balance. We're looking at depth perception. We're looking at reaction times. We're looking at how long it takes to actually process that information. Stuff that obviously I'm not an eye vision expert, but on the motorsports side, we know what we're looking for. But the thing that we found out about this is that the riders and drivers that had deficiencies, it's actually extremely easy to train. I actually just worked with a good client of mine last week. He's 76 years old, and he's going faster than he ever has since we've got him on a vision training program. Faster than ever. I mean, it's incredible, right? He's so quick, but this is all 100% due to vision training. So yes, your vision is trainable regardless of your age, regardless of where you start. You can absolutely get your vision going. And to Dion's point, the drills can be really, really simple. You can literally take a piece of paper and put 5 points on it and move your eyes from point to point. You can hold your thumbs out in front of you and scan from left to right on your thumbs. You can play catch. Catch turns on 80% of your receptors for with depth perception and how your eyes get warmed up. There's so many things that you can do just to get some basic vision skills going. But yeah, vision is completely trainable.
Go for it.
Sorry, a lot of people on today's call are classroom instructors as well. So this little drill here is something that they could do in the classroom as drivers are progressing through. So they could, do it with our novice group drivers just to kind of get that thought process going and 100%. Build on some more in-classroom strategies and drills to see how it can differ as they are continuing up the pathway of their skill set.
And it's fun, some of these could be a little bit boring, like looking at the thumb, maybe that's a little bit boring, but a lot of these can be really fun. And so for anyone here that wants to learn more about them, that's my email address, my personal one. Don't hesitate to email me. We're building out an entire library of this. We're having a whole training plan section of our Blaze app where we're going to give you a video of a drill. You'll have sets and reps. You'll be able to log the workout of sorts, and that'll be shared with your coach. So we're kind of going through this process already. We probably have about 30 different drills between hand-eye coordination, foot-eye coordination, vision training drills on top of sim racing drills. So just don't hesitate to, if everyone needs some drills or wants some help or has any question, don't hesitate to email me. And the best way that I kind of mentally think about it, I think, Ken, you said this once, is it's sort of like the eyes, the 2020 vision, the 2010 vision is almost like the hardware, where all of this other stuff is the software that we're really training. I think that's the best way to sort of think about a lot of this. Right? So that was our whole kind of conversation today. I hope that you're not sitting there wide-eyed like, what the hell did I just listen to, and I can't process all of this. I'm sure there's some of that to be expected. But what I'd love to do is turn into, if anyone has any questions, go to the Q&A thing at the bottom. You click on that. You can type in your questions, anything at all. I'd love to spend the next 10, 15 minutes or so. If there are questions, we can run through that. While we wait on any questions, Mia, did we hit on everything? Hopefully this all made sense.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important even if they haven't, we participated in a whole classroom session on just the exit corners and entry corners with you. So that was an hour-long conversation. So obviously what you guys are talking about today could be done in 10 hours. But my hope is that everybody that's listening, it just starts the widgets working in their brains and maybe inspires them to do some further training on their own. I mean, on some of the videos that are out there, and just get us all back into the process of being adult learners, and that need and desire to continually improve your skill set. So hopefully it just like sparks something so they can, continue the passage of this knowledge.
And just to build on that, I really hope that that's the case too. My own journey here, I retired from pro racing. I would have thought I knew everything there was about this sport. But then what Ken sort of did for me is putting words and a process behind this. Like, I naturally did a lot of this, the vision, but it wasn't something that I like consciously knew. So just, even if this is stuff that you're like, well, yeah, duh, having it sort of built into a process just sort of formalizes into your mind. And I've become a better driver after retiring by learning from someone like a Ken. So if I'm still learning, I hope everyone else is still open to learning as well.
Yeah, I think, Dion, that point. So like to give you an example about my client last week, he just is completely into motorsports, and he was doing actually cars and motorcycles, right? So here he actually was able to get on a lightweight twins podium at like age 73 in expert class on a motorcycle, right? Crazy. But then he was kind of like, I'm done with that. And he's like, well, I'm struggling. His lap times were slowing down. And basically we found that his vision, his ability to pick things up was starting to lag. And we got him in a pretty intensive vision training program. We got him evaluated, figured out exactly what was happening. He's able to mitigate that. He's actually wearing some of the Synaptech goggles that do all the crazy flashing. And he's got exercises. And now not only we're back to where he was, but again, we've surpassed it. And here again, he's 76. So all of these things are trainable. Now, in this case, it's vision. But if somebody with motor controls or somebody with not understanding track dynamics, that's the whole idea, is that everybody on this call is in a position where we can influence other people, and we can put them in a position to go as far in the sport as they want by giving them the right tools. And vision is just an amazing, amazing place to start with that.
Absolutely. So I see some questions coming in here. The first question comes from Rick, and it's a little probably off subject of the eyes in a way that would probably take me a lot longer to answer, but I want to highlight it really quick. So Rick's question was, if a driver is over their head and it's time to come into the hot pits to talk, once stopped, like, how do you start the conversation? My context of this, and this is, like, we all have very different styles, and I'm not saying my way to handle this is the right way to handle it. But my very first thing is to come back to the breath. Together, take a deep breath, relax out. And I want to come back to, what are we working on this session? What are our focal points in this session? Are we focused on our initial brake zone? Are we focused on our exit reference point? What are our goals? And what are we trying to do to achieve those goals? And then asking them, how did you feel that we executed on that in the first 3 laps? And getting them to talk, I think, is the number one thing. The other part of this is having empathy to listen to the tone of their voice, to their words, and understand that they are in a highly emotional state, and so are you. And the honest answer here is, this is often the worst time to coach someone. When they are doing the action is not the time to coach. So for me, that's the time to take a step back, remind us of what our priorities are, what our goals are, how do we get back there? And I might try to nudge them in that direction of, okay, let's refocus on this one thing, and let's get back out there if I feel like we're ready to get back out there. So I guess it's somewhat unrelated, but
answer. That's a fantastic answer.
I'm glad it was helpful. Hopefully that makes sense. It's not an easy thing to do, right? So going to the next question here, and Ken, I'm going to give this one over to you. it was anonymous, so I don't know who asked this, but can you say more about how the glance scan relates to our depth perception versus, focus or peripheral vision?
Yeah. So if we want to figure out where we want to release the brake coming into a corner, and we can pick 1,000 corners, right? We can pick some at turn one. We can pick VIR turn one, just some examples that have kind of a longer entry. The goal is, of course, we want to brake as late and as hard as we can. We want to obviously carry as much speed into the corner. But what matters is where we want to release the brake. So to figure out where we want to release the brake, we need to be able, as we apply the brakes, we need to match up where we're releasing the brake, because we can obviously stop the car typically a lot harder. If we just slam the brakes on and try to stop the car as quickly as we can stop before typically where we're going to optimally release the brake, because that brake release is also what keeps the entry speed and roll speed up. So using our depth perception, the ability to gauge and match our motor controls for the amount of speed that you want to carry into the corner is what we're trying to accomplish. So if you go to the brakes and you're only looking in front of your car, you're more than likely going to overslow because you're thinking that is the brake release point or the slowest point of the corner. Where instead, if you apply the brake, now you've applied it. Let's say, okay, cool, you're at the floorboard. You apply the brakes at the floorboard, but then a quick glance into where you want to let off the brake, whether you move your head or move your eyes, but something that says, oh, that's right, I actually want to release my brakes down there. That's what connects your motor controls to your eyes and your motor controls together. So then you can start to use that to control your brake graph and how much pressure you want to use. So that's the short answer there.
Exactly. So Todd was asking, what is your process to orient a new driver at the beginning of the session? Key points. I'm a little confused, Todd, on exactly what you're asking for. My understanding here, and Ken, let me know if you think this is right, is sort of like new session. How do I get them back to the reference points and look at the reference points? Is that what you kind of understand from that question?
Yeah, I think, what is your process to orient a new driver at the beginning of the session? Key points. Well, I think in overall, when I read that, I'm going to say something along the lines of, okay, what is our goal for the session? And, what are we trying to accomplish? If we're trying to accomplish our apexes or exit apexes or what it might be, we're going to have, not only are we going to state what that plan is, but we're going to have the actual key techniques to execute it. But more importantly, we're going to have report cards to know if we did it right or wrong. So that way, when you come back into the pitch, you can say, hey, so, how did that go? Were we able to execute it? What were some of the report cards we talked about? And were we able to get to those certain report cards? So that way it speeds those things up. So yeah, I read it as what was the goal for the session? How you're trying to accomplish it. And so again, it should be, having the goal, defining what the goal is, looking at the objectives, and then how do you know if you did it right?
Yeah, and just to build on that, like as an example here, every time that I'm working with a driver, for example, there's a husband and wife that are PCA drivers, and I coach both of them through Blaze. And before they go back to VIR, I asked them, hey, send me your notes of like what you're thinking about. And they sent me back this track map, and that entire track map had writing all over it, right? Like every corner was like paragraphs of notes. And I sort of sent them, here's my track map. And it was turn one, slow point, minimum speed, exit speed corner, right? Turn three, here's my slow point, exit speed corner. And I'm like, this made it seem like I'm a very simple human being, but like, no, this is the time that we want to keep things simple and have the right plan. So rooting back your driver and the level they're at to what they're focused on and what their goals are, and then what's the inputs that'll drive there, all should root down to a very simple, this is what we're focused on. And then, they're able to kind of deliver their process. And by the way, sort of, we're all on the path to mastery here, right? And on that path, things are going to start off conscious for us, that we have to consciously think about where that exit apex is. But as we do that, as we build reps and as we practice it, it slowly becomes subconscious. And as that technique becomes subconscious, that's the time to introduce the next focal point to that driver. So that's why this is an iterative process that, I want you to know everything, but we're going to take it one step at a time. So answering Don's question, isn't the slow point in the corner the same as focusing on the point where you want to stop trail braking? No, that's not the same thing. For example, I know a lot of us drivers are at Summit Point or drive at Summit Point. Turn 4 is an entry speed corner, meaning I want my minimum speed coming after the apex point. But I don't want to be trail braking in a high-speed corner all the way down to that apex point, right? I'm going to be coasting. For those that rode America, the kink, my minimum speed comes as my right front tire is getting to the start of that apex curve. I'm not trail braking all the way down there. My end of brake zone is far earlier than that. So the two are disconnected. Sometimes, yes, it happens to be the same point, but not all the time. So I like to be very specific with that definition.
I'll add real quick on that, Deanna. It also can be radius dependent, right? Because there's if you have a big long open rate like Road America carousel, right? So your slow point can last a really long time. You're done with braking, of course, but you're not going to be able to accelerate obviously until you can take away some wheel. So it depends on the radius of the corner. Long radius corners, slow point's going to last a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, we got some great questions tonight here. And that's just to build on that. I saw Bill said, does slow point equal end of brake zone? So just to kind of clarify, no, it does not mean end of brake zone. Different points. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So just I wouldn't think about it in that way. So coming back here, David, and this is maybe more of a different kind of way that he likes to think about it, and I think that's great, is rather than focusing on points, he's had success coaching people to visualize the arc that connects the point. This kind of combines a lot of what you're talking about into a more holistic vision approach. I think that's great. I think that you've got to be able to kind of, imagine Google Earth and maybe kind of looking on top of it or something like that. So yeah, I think whatever works, I'm all about. Ken, you have success with that too?
I think the big thing on that is, I think as long as you are getting the main reference points and you're getting intricate focus from those, I think that's great. That'll actually help slow down the brain processing. And then you feel a little bit more connected. You don't feel like nobody wants to get into a corner surprised, right? Because then you've got less things in your toolbox to pull from, right? It all becomes very reactive, right? Proactive versus reactive. So, and that's honestly something that I do work on as well, as I do have my central reference points, but I'm going to try to look at some of the other things to gather as much information I can to maximize something. So I think that is great as long as we're not straying away from getting the intricate focus from the points that you need.
Yeah, exactly. I think the two sort of work together, but you can't remove the points at the end of the day. Yeah. So Christian was asking here, I noticed myself glancing between points as I approach a corner. Is that something that's helpful or not? My initial gut reaction is I would need to know more. I think this is one where nuance is really, really important. My gut says if I visualize sort of how I take that, I would say that's probably not what we want. Like as I'm approaching the corner, yeah, my peripherals sort of making sure there's not a smoke and crashing in front of me, but I'm focusing on that next reference point. And if you're glancing around a bunch of reference points, you're probably losing your focus. But I don't know if that's what you really mean. I think that's just where something super nuanced. Ken, do you have any takes on that kind of approaching the corner and shifting between?
Well, I think that's exactly the same answer or the same type of question as the one that we had before, which is, again, I think moving your eyes around a little bit is okay, but we still have to prioritize the main reference points. If we're not prioritizing the reference points, then I can guarantee you're not getting all the information from them. So it's okay to move your eyes around a little bit, but we can't lose track. I mean, a good exercise for that, and Dion, you've done it, which is, you might be coming down the front straightaway and you might glance at your pit board, right? So I mean, you can move your eyes around a little bit, but you're still not losing touch with what your main reference points are.
Yeah, I love that. So let's see here. Fraser was saying, you mentioned early on that tension causes low eyes, which I don't disagree with, but I've also taught that low eyes causes tension. We can feel it in the car when the student isn't looking far enough ahead without even looking at them. The brain is focused too close. We can't change the way the brain reacts to information, but we can change the information it's getting by looking farther ahead. I don't disagree with that. I think it's a loop, right? So yeah, one can cause the other, which can make the other one worse. I do think that you can actually do a little bit where you can change the way that brain reacts to information, right? Like when I said early on that, oh man, this feels fast, my brain's reaction is, oh, let me get my eyes up. So I disagree with that point just a little bit on the kind of maybe the subtle context of it. But yeah, I think what you're saying is spot on, where low eyes can cause tension and tension can also cause low eyes, and they can just be like this self-fulfilling circle that gets worse and worse and worse. So Joe was asking, it's great to have the reinforcement of concept of looking too far ahead. If you were to give a single command from the right seat as I was entering the turn and looking too far or too close, how would you articulate this? I mean, I think that's, from my take, that's really challenging to answer. I think it depends on the student and where they struggle. Is it too far? Is it too, like, where they typically break down? I would just sort of say something like, find your next reference point or find reference point, something really quick. And I think that's, Ken, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think, and again, it depends on depends exactly what you're working on. But if we were working on reference points and you found that their eyes weren't doing exactly what you wanted them to do, having some sort of a word you could say, either find your next apex or exit, apex or exit, eyes in, eyes out. So a couple points here, and it actually goes back a little bit to Fraser's question as well, is one of the things that I'll help students with in the beginning when they're new. Again, this is like drinking out of a gigantic fire hose. It's so much information. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we have to make it at a massive, 60,000 foot view. And in the beginning, to get their eyes to train to move can simply be when they go to the brakes, eyes in, eyes in, eyes in. And when they go to the throttle, because they go to the throttle, that means they're happy with whatever speed they've got. You can say eyes out. So that at least gives them the ability. Is it perfect? No. But does it start to give them some eye timing? Eyes in gives them to start to concentrate their vision going in. And to back that up again with what Fraser said, there's times where you need to dictate where they need to look. Like it might be, I don't know, whatever, come out of the last corner at Road America and be like, move your eye, look for the bridge. And what that does is it gets them out of where they're at right now and makes them expand their eyes to help slow things down. So there are things that you can do where, you can give them something to look at that gets them out of where they're at and kind of gets them back on track. But again, starting off this process can be as simple as if they're on the brakes, eyes in. And then if they get to a point of where they're fading in too much, you can say back to your reference point or, scan back to your reference point. And that starts their eye timing basically journey.
I love that. And like, if when I was right seat coach, and I don't do it anymore, I tried it like 3 words or less. Like that was really kind of my process. Anything more than that, there's no way in hell they're going to be able to process it, right? So that's sort of how I keep things. So Bruce, we're going to have 3 more questions here. We'll call it a night. Bruce was asking, one of the biggest issues that he has instructing newer drivers is, in traffic and then just staring at the bumper. And that's, when we had kind of a limited time, I purposely had to leave that whole thing out of it, or else we would be here for hours. The big part of your question that gets my concern is what would you suggest to get the student to get their eyes off the bumper in front of them, no matter what I do? Like if they just won't do it, if they are stuck and they're not able to do it, I need to take them out of that situation. So that's where let's slow down. Let's let them go. Let's go to pit lane. Let's get ourselves out of that position, because if they're sort of paralyzed and they can't, something that a little bit of a short circuit, they need to come and take a breath. And I don't mean to say like they've lost it. No, it's just, hey, let's get ourselves out of the situation. Let's go talk about it, what we want to do. I don't expect you to get it right away. but I want you to understand that, hey, this is what I was trying to say. This is what you're doing. I want to hear what they think they were doing and have a little bit more of a conversation about it. So anytime someone's like just stuck in a rut and just not able to, like, not making a change at all, that's where I'm like, okay, let's get out of the situation and talk about this in a state where you can process. So my bigger problem there is they're probably not processing. How do you get someone to not stare at the bumper in front of you? For me, you gotta have them always focus on what is my normal reference point. And if they're trying to find their reference points, they're going to naturally try to look through the car in front of them. Sure, they may not be able to see them, but at least they're thinking about that. And that's typically what I'm going to try to do, is just like find your normal reference point.
Make them
verbalize
it. Like, make them verbalize what
that's
the
a great
reference
one.
point is.
Yeah, if they can verbalize it, they're probably in a pretty good mental state. I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Let's see here. Is there any way to get students more comfortable using their peripheral vision to stop them looking down at references until the last moment? For me, that's, knowing where, like, this, the knowledge of knowing where they should be looking. And there's a couple of steps to this. Number one is they need reps, right? At the end of the day, they just need to be able to practice this. They're not going to get this right day one. So making it simple, I think Ken's example of the eyes in, eyes out, and getting them comfortable, just shifting their vision, is a great entry-level step to that. And then having them understand really when they should be looking where. So for me, a lot of problem with low eyes is they don't even know what good eyes looks like and when they should be looking somewhere, and someone just tells them eyes up and they're like, what the hell does that actually mean?
Exactly.
So I think the eyes in, eyes out is a great way to introduce that.
Yeah, that one actually will cover that. I mean, that covers that because it starts to introduce eye timing, right? So if you're decelerating, it means a corner's coming up, you're scared. So you need, right? So you need to look into where you need to be. And of course, if you're off the brake and now on the throttle, then your vision can go out. So
yeah, awesome. And then
can I get this next one with Brent?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Brent's question: how do you monitor a driver's vision during sections that have a very short time between reference points and basically things are just condensed? So every corner has those 5 references that we pointed out. But as you know, when you're hauling ass, or they become so short, when you're time crunched, what we'll look for is a singular reference point that if you get that one reference point, you're good. VIR turn 4. I know if I get my turn-in point, I'm good. I know, I can look at summit point, right? Summit point, turn 1. If I get my brake application point, turn 1's good. If I get my turning point for summit turn 10, I'm good. The rest of the corner literally takes care of itself. So as you start to run out of time, whether it's pace or whether it's how that corner's laid out, you start picking one reference point that that if you get that one, you're good. And to Dion's point, back when he talked about how he wrote his reference points out, that's actually something that we do with our pro athletes as well. After every single session with our pro athletes is we will have them take a track map, and it's every session, and we have them write something on the entry and we have them write something on the exit. Now, it could be something that's happening with the vehicle. It could be their reference point, but it's something that's going on in that corner that's where their brain space is at. That's their singular focus for that point. And that makes a huge difference in trying to narrow those things down. Absolutely.
I think we can end it on that one tonight. Just want to say thank you again to each and every one of you for making time to join us. It's not hyperbole to say that you all are the most important people in our sport, right? Instructors are the educators, the salespeople, the camaraderie builders, the everything. So all of you are helping build our sport, and the more we can help you provide a great experience to the entry-level drivers, the more people that are going to stick around our sport and the more our sport's going to grow. So I just want to say thank you guys for taking the time to invest in yourself. It's the single best thing that you can do in your own journey. It's the cheapest way for you to selfishly go faster, which we all love, right? But also improve yourself as instructor and help other drivers go faster. So hopefully tonight was helpful. And Mia, thanks again for kind of putting this all together. We'll send out the recordings, the PowerPoints, and if we can be helpful to any one of you, my email address, again, it's dion@blaze.io. Reach out to me. I'm happy to help in any way we can. And if you don't know how to get me, Mia can probably help you there as well.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. I'm so thrilled to see so many of the instructors looking to hone their skills and to continue improvement because, as you said, it is for our growth of our sport because if we don't have new drivers out there and coaches that are willing to help them, then, it's going to go away. So thanks, everybody. Ken, specifically, thank you so much. Dion, always a pleasure. And good night to everybody else.
Good night. Thanks, Ken, as well.